Have you ever heard of someone who wasn't a trained fighter, wasn't carrying a weapon, and wasn't even supposed to be in the line of fire, yet became the only hope when an entire Navy SEAL team was captured? This isn't a war movie. This is the story of a woman who was just cooking in a military mess hall until chaos struck, and she proved that heroes sometimes wear aprons instead of armor. Stay with me till the end, because what she did in the shadows will give you chills. And before we dive in, don't forget to hit subscribe, because we bring you stories of courage you'll never hear anywhere else. The forward operating base in a remote desert valley wasn't glamorous. It was dusty, scorching in the day, freezing at night. The Navy SEAL detachment stationed there lived by routine, missions at dawn, training drills through the day, and a few stolen hours of laughter over meals in the mess hall. For them, the heart of the base wasn't the command tent or the weapons cache. It was the kitchen. And at the center of that kitchen was Staff Sergeant Maria Lopez. At 29, Maria wasn't a SEAL. She wasn't trained to storm compounds or parachute into hostile territory. She was a Navy cook, responsible for keeping warriors fueled. To her, food was her weapon. Every plate she served was a small way of keeping morale alive in a place where death was always close. The SEALs adored her. She joked with them, patched their cuts with her basic medic training, and listened quietly when they needed to unload stories too heavy to carry alone. In their eyes, she was more than a cook. She was family. What none of them knew was that Maria's life before the Navy had taught her more about survival than anyone realized. She had grown up in one of the roughest neighborhoods of Los Angeles, where violence was a daily reality. Her father had drilled into her the values of grit and never backing down, even if she wasn't the strongest in the fight. And that lesson was about to be tested in a way no one could have imagined. IT was a night like any other. Maria was in the mess hall late, cleaning up after dinner, the smell of coffee still hanging in the air. Most of the SEALs had gathered outside the perimeter for a nighttime reconnaissance sweep. The base seemed quiet, too quiet. Then the silence shattered. Explosions ripped through the desert air, followed by gunfire. Maria's heart lurched as she dropped a tray of dishes. She rushed to the window and froze. Shadows moved fast across the compound. Enemy fighters, dozens of them, storming the base with terrifying precision. Within minutes, the small unit of SEALs was overwhelmed. She saw them dragged into trucks, blindfolded, beaten. Maria's first instinct was to run, to hide. She wasn't armed, wasn't trained. But as the attackers searched the base, something inside her snapped. If she did nothing, the men who had become her brothers would vanish into the night, and no one would know until it was too late. Maria ducked into the kitchen storage room, her mind racing. Weapons? None. But tools? Plenty. She grabbed the sharpest knife she could find, duct tape, and a heavy skillet. Improvised, yes, but it would have to do. She wasn't going to let them take her family without a fight. The mess hall door creaked open. Two enemy fighters entered, laughing, searching for supplies. Maria crouched in the shadows, her grip tight on the skillet. As one walked past her hiding spot, she struck hard. The skillet crashed against his skull, and he dropped instantly. The second spun, knife flashing, but Maria lunged, driving her kitchen blade upward into his arm. He screamed, and she silenced him with a strike to the throat. Her chest heaved. She'd never killed before. Her hands shook, but there was no time to process. She stripped one of the men of his weapon and ammo, hiding the bodies in the pantry. For the first time, Maria wasn't just a cook. She was a soldier. The trucks carrying the captured SEALs were just leaving. Maria knew the desert routes. If she didn't move now, they'd disappear into hostile territory. She slipped into the shadows, following on foot. Every step was agony. Sand cutting into her boots, heart hammering. But she pressed on. She tracked them to an abandoned village less than 3 miles away. The fighters dragged the SEALs into a crumbling stone building. Maria crouched on a ridge, watching, counting. 20 enemies, armed to the teeth. Against her, one stolen rifle and a kitchen knife. Any sane person would have turned back. But Maria wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about the men inside, bound and beaten, depending on someone, anyone, to fight for them. Maria waited until night thickened. Then she moved, slipping into the ruins like a shadow. She used every trick she had learned surviving on tough streets. Silence, timing, using darkness as her ally. One guard down with a knife to the throat. Another distracted with a tossed stone, only to be silenced by her stolen pistol. Her heart thundered as she reached the inner chamber. The SEALs were there, tied, bloodied but alive. Their leader, Lieutenant Harris, locked eyes with her. "Maria," he whispered, disbelief etched across his battered face. "What are you doing here?" "Cooking," she whispered back with a grim smile, cutting through his restraints. "Now shut up and let's go." The men wanted to fight, but they were too weak. Maria took point, leading them out one by one. But just as they reached the courtyard, headlights flared, reinforcements arriving. Shouts erupted. Gunfire cracked. The escape was blown. Bullets whizzed past as Maria shoved the SEALs into cover. She fired wildly, not with the precision of a marksman, but with the fury of someone who refused to quit. She ducked behind rubble, reloaded with shaking hands, and kept shooting. Then came the pain. A searing stab tore through her side. Then another. Knives. In the chaos, enemy fighters had closed in. Maria fought back, slashing, kicking, refusing to fall. She was stabbed once, twice, 3 times. Her vision blurred. 4, 5. Her body screamed. 6, 7. By the 7th stab, she collapsed onto the sand, blood soaking her uniform. But in that chaos, her stand had bought precious minutes. U.S. reinforcements, alerted by distress signals from the base, swept in. Helicopters thundered overhead, Marines pouring out, pushing back the attackers. The SEALs were dragged to safety, and Maria, barely clinging to life, was lifted onto a stretcher. Maria woke up days later in a military hospital, her body stitched, bandaged, unrecognizable from the scars. She blinked against the sterile lights, unsure if she had survived or if this was a dream. Then she heard voices, familiar ones. Her SEAL team stood at her bedside, every single one of them alive because of her. Lieutenant Harris leaned close, his voice thick with emotion. "Maria, you saved us. You fought like one of us. You were one of us." Tears burned her eyes. She had never sought glory, never imagined she'd be called a hero. But in that moment, the truth was undeniable. Weeks later, Maria returned to the mess hall, apron back on, ladle in hand. The SEALs joked, teased, tried to act like things were normal. But every time she served them a plate, their eyes held something different. Respect, gratitude. She was no longer just the cook. She was the reason they were alive. Word spread quietly through the ranks. Stories of Maria's stand reached high command. She received commendations, though she never flaunted them. To her, the real reward was simple. The sound of her SEAL team laughing in the mess hall, alive, whole, together. And though she still wore her apron, every Marine and SEAL who crossed her path knew the truth. Maria Lopez was a warrior. One who fought not because it was her duty, but because it was her heart. And that's the story of the cook who became a soldier, the woman who stood alone against impossible odds and refused to let her family fall. True courage doesn't always come with rank or weapons. Sometimes it comes from the quietest place, the kitchen, the nurse's office, the ordinary lives we overlook until the moment fate calls. If this story gave you chills, make sure you subscribe right now, because we bring you more stories of hidden heroes, the ones the world needs to remember.